Hi, this is part 2 of Zack Snyder. Here we go. Henry Cavill was quickly taken for the main role in the film Man of Steel, but Lois Zack Snyder dug for a long time. She could even become Kristen Stewart. Many probably would be delighted. As a result, they stopped at Amy Adams. The director assures that everything is due to the fact that she is a talented actress. However, there was a serious age difference, which was often noticed. Amy Adams and Henry Cavill are almost 10 years old, which is why Adams sometimes looked like his mother. Instead of Kevin Costner, they could have taken a combat pensioner, but they didn't. Perhaps due to the fact that the character at some point had to fly as stupidly as possible to the Emerald City, and the Nielsen that flew there silently would have looked too ridiculous. Sometimes you can hear the opinion that a man made of steel did not justify hope, and it was because of this that the whole DC universe in the future covered with a copper basin. This moment, of course, exists, but at another time in another place it would not be so critical. The film was very unlucky to immediately go after the Avengers, who blew up the cast and renewed many records, collecting $1.5 billion. The viewer wanted the Avengers, which affected the cash register of the third Iron Man, who also strongly went for $1 billion. And here they offer something completely different and strongly reminiscent of one of the main cash failures of 2006. Since the release of Return of Superman, only 7 years have passed. In general, a lot was against Snyder and the Man of Steel, and the Warner studio, having seen the collections around him, was scared. He collected the Man of Steel in a role of $668 million with a budget of $230. These are good cash collections for the start of the series, especially after a similar project that failed heavily. For Christopher Nolan, from the box office of his Batman after Batman and Robin, everything was much worse. But then the comics did not fly up somewhere, and even such a box office was considered normal, with the same good results on the media. There was already a completely different situation around the Man of Steel. The fact is that Snyder was supposed to shoot the second Man of Steel. But when the studio saw what the superhero cabbage could give, all the plans changed quickly, and Snyder was ordered to make a Batman vs. Superman movie, with a sharp change of direction and an order from above to give the cabbage immediately without any preparation. As it was with the Marvel Studios, often links all the problems of the DC universe. The problems of Ben Affleck are also often linked to this, but he is already to blame himself. After all, he once swore to all the high-ranking that he would not wear a tricot anymore. The sharp rise of the comics made him forget about his promise. The filming of Batman v Superman ended in the middle of 2014. All the problems of the film started when the test shows were passed. They were from the series when there is a knock at the door and the viewer tries to leave the scary place at any cost. Already at the end of 2014, pre-filming and refilming were completed, designed to save the non-working cinema. They were going for a whole month, from November to the beginning of December 2014, after which even smaller repairs were required. The viewer did not understand the essence of the conflict itself, so they shot different things with Batman to somehow explain his dissatisfaction with Superman's actions. Difficult childhood, mother-fed little breast, and all this. Remodens was going on all 2015. The premiere from 2015 had to be postponed. The official reason is standard. It was necessary to prepare a higher quality, and for it, as usual, time is needed. In the cinema, the film was delivered in March 2016, where it was met with huge reviews by critics. The tape received 8 nominations at once for the Golden Mermaid. Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck earned their nominations. They received, however, only the general one for the worst acting ensemble. Only Jesse Eisenberg was noted separately. Zack Snyder also got his first, and so far the only nomination for Golden Mermaid as the worst director. However, although the falls in the cast of Batman and Superman were record-breaking for a film with such a budget, he was able to raise a decent budget. Here we have 2 budgets again. One is $250 and the second is $325. This one is already taken into account and it has never been officially confirmed. It was possible to collect $874 million. The studio could earn something even with a budget of $325, even if it was clearly not what it was counting on. Here, they often ask why Snyder was not removed from the director's chair of the Justice League since there was such a strong fire. It was hard to do, if not even impossible. Firstly, the filming of the film started immediately after the premiere of Batman v Superman, and the collapse of them before the very start threatened with millions of losses. Secondly, the history of the Justice League was dragged through all the zeros. Then George Miller, responsible for Mad Max, wanted to put the cinema. But at the end of the zeros, the project was cancelled. On the one hand, due to the success of The Dark Knight, on the other hand, due to the conflict with the Australian authorities, which at the last moment blocked the increased tax benefits on which Warner Studios was counting, filming the film in Australia. It is quite possible that all this worked together. The Dark Knight collected too much, it could not be tied to the League, and then the studio was afraid to use separate different Batmans. In general, it took a lot of money to prepare for the shooting and the script, and the studio could do the same focus for the second time in a row. The cancellation of that League cost her about $30 million, and this one could cost even more. So Zack Snyder was left as a director and the movie was shot. But Snyder was still cut off. He was rejected by the standard operator Larry Fong, officially because of busyness. But if you follow Larry's career, you can see that during the filming of the Justice League, he was busy with nothing but spitting into the ceiling. Plus, the studio workers who beat him with sticks for any attempt to step aside were assigned to Snyder. Since Snyder did not have a script, he was written on the go. It took days and even weeks for all the agreements. Many episodes that were supposed to be in the film because of delays were not shot. In general, there was a typical drama of the dead film. Its filming ended in early autumn 2016, and in May 2017, Snyder left the position of director, officially because of the suicide of his daughter. Not officially, but problems with the director and bad test shows were written before that. Perhaps this event simply covered. Snyder was immediately replaced by Joss Whedon, director of the first Avengers. He was supposed to shoot for the Bad Girls studio, and he was convinced to fix the Justice League, which was convinced by the mystery so far. This whole story will be better covered in a general video about the death of the DC Universe. As it turned out, not the smartest man, Joss Whedon, agreed and lost Batgirl as well as his entire career. The reshoot of the League, according to various data, cost about $30 million. According to the most modest estimates, Whedon reshoot 30% of the material and reduced the Justice League by more than an hour. After watching such a movie, there is only one question left: was there any sense? The point is, with reshoots, it would still have to cut the movie, since the first version of Snyder was almost 4 hours. And a film with such a time frame cannot be released in our time. Different Titanics go only 3 hours. That is, it was necessary to cut Snyder's movie. A 4-hour film in cinemas would collect even less. Justice League got into the cinemas in October 2017 and collected $657 million with a budget of $300. The show film was only 2 hours. When the studio was overwhelmed with criticism for the quality of the film, there were many rumors about the likelihood of a Snyder cut. Surprisingly, the Justice League has no golden raspberries. Critics, of course, booed, but not as much as on Batman vs. Superman. In 2020, it was officially announced that the director's version of the film League of Justice would be released. Out of curiosity, there were pre-films. That is, there were no moments in the film that were broadcast on test shows. It can be assumed that Snyder was not allowed to shoot any episodes at once, and in 2020 he fixed it. And it can be assumed that some work on errors has passed and there could not have been such a film in 2017. Here, everyone can choose a version that they like more. They spent another $70 million on the director's version. That is, the total budget of the Justice League is $370 million, and it does not become the most expensive film in history without taking into account inflation, only because the era of Ultron, according to leaked documents from Disney Studios, cost $495 million. Initially, the 4-hour directorial version of Zack Snyder wanted to turn into a series, but this idea was quite quickly rejected in favor of the full meter. Snyder himself assures that he had never seen the version of Joss Whedon, so he collected his own from a clean sheet. On the streaming service, Zack Snyder's Justice League came out in 2021, and due to the fact that the services protect their figures from the views of bad people, we cannot know how well the movie was going. According to the calculations of independent companies, it was viewed by twice as many people as the same Mortal Kombat, but Mortal had a hybrid release. It came out in numbers at the same time as it was shown in theaters, so any comparisons will be unfair. It is a little more convenient to compare with the new Batman, which did not have a hybrid release. The League also gave him more than twice, but he also has a moment with the fact that the director's version came out 4 years later, and in the case of Batman, only 3 months have passed. Again, there are moments when you can cling to. If we turn to the rumors, they assure that the studio was not satisfied with the figures demonstrated by the director's version of the League. That is, such expenses were not worth it. But here too, you can write everything down on evil people. What is really there, we will never know. Well, Zack Snyder went to Netflix, where David Fincher also went. The service gives the directors more freedom, although in the case of Zack, there is one nuance related to the rebellious moon. However, the first film of the director was The Army of the Dead. The film was declared as the start of a new franchise with sequels, prequels, and even bookvilles. One of the spin-offs in the truth appeared, The Army of Thieves. It went quietly, so it is difficult to say how successful the idea was. The Army of the Dead itself, according to well-known figures, performed well. According to official data, the film took 8th place in the history of the service. Initially, this film was also supposed to be shot at Warner Studios, with which Snyder constantly worked, but in 2019, the project went to Netflix. Well, what if someone doesn't know? The Army of the Dead, according to critics, is the best film in Zack Snyder's career since The Dawn of the Dead and the director's version of the Justice League. In all other projects of the director, the average rating of critics is lower. Here you can suspect the use of different powerful people. Critics are usually prone to this. But although the film has officially demonstrated the 8th figures in the history of the service, there is no continuation of the franchise in 2024 yet. At the end of the 21st, Snyder reported that he was working on a sequel, but so far, apparently he has not worked on it. The last film of the director at the moment is The Raging Moon. This movie could once have become Star Wars. It was for them that Zack Snyder wrote the script, but Disney Studios, having read it, refused. At that time, they believed that everything was due to the excessive gloominess of the adult rating, which the Disney studio, which produced Star Wars with teenage ratings, cannot afford. But now it turned out that the Netflix streaming service also cannot afford it, and The Rebellious Moon came out on the service with a teenage rating, and the adult one will come out someday later, while it is assumed that in the summer. In general, many began to suspect something. The Rebellious Moon has already issued worse figures. It could only get to the 5th place in the official service figures for 2023. In general, the score of the tape is far beyond the first 20, but there is still a victory here, although it is not entirely clear who is to blame. The movie was divided into 2 parts, and it cost $166 million. That is, one film now costs $85 million. And although the sequel will be released only in the middle of the spring, with such an approach from The Rebellious Moon, everything should be fine. And for someone who came up with such an easy way to tear the movie apart, it is necessary to give some big prize. Since now it can all turn into a very solid success. Show the existing figures a full-fledged film with a budget of $166 million. This would even look like a complete failure according to the official figures, and so the sequel will also bring some figures in any case. In general, no matter what you say, but Zack Snyder has his own style. Perhaps Zack Snyder is opposed to being an orchestra man, which he thinks about in his latest films. Any film where Zack thinks about a screenwriter immediately becomes very suspicious. Although personally, I would very much like to see the director's version of the forbidden technique. There are interesting ideas in the film that look torn. Perhaps this is because of the cracks after the test shows. And perhaps Zack Snyder is a very good screenwriter. As I said, Snyder is not old for the director yet. The director is 57 years old. Quentin Tarantino still gives him 3 years for some good movie, after which, according to Quentin's standards, Zack will have to retire. Snyder must have time to shoot another movie. If this movie is on Netflix, then you can already say goodbye to the director. But I want to believe that his passport has not been taken away, and he will still be able to shoot a movie for someone else, if the gunpowder is still there. The main thing is to find a smart screenwriter somewhere, and it is better not to climb behind the camera either and to entrust this matter to professionals. Happy to introduce you to a fantastic website that lets you stream movies, shows, and documentaries without the hassle of juggling multiple subscriptions like HBO, Netflix, Max, Hulu, Apple TV, and others. Just click the link in the description to check out this top-notch streaming service today. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more great content. Share your thoughts and suggestions for future videos in the comments below, and don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an update.